Section 1. The Devil's Footprint, from Myth to History. They say the devil himself once visited a small church in the English countryside. The story tells of a dark night, a terrifying presence, and a mark left behind for all to see. This tale is not from a forgotten book of fables. It is a living legend tied to a real place. The church is St. Botolph's in a tiny village called Skidbrooke, located in the county of Lincolnshire. For generations, people have called it the Devil Church. This name comes from a story so powerful, it has overshadowed the building's true history. But what if we could peel back the layers of the myth? What if we could look past the frightening legend and find the real story of the church and the people who built it, people who lived by it and eventually told stories about it? My journey to Skidbrooke was not just a trip to see an old building. It was a journey into the heart of folklore itself, a chance to stand where a story was born. The air in the Lincolnshire marshes feels ancient, and as you approach the isolated church, it is easy to understand how such a dramatic tale could take root here. The goal was to spend a night, not to hunt for ghosts or demons, but to listen to the silence and feel the weight of history. I wanted to understand why this specific church, among thousands in England, earned its sinister nickname. The legend is compelling, but the history hidden beneath it is even more so. It is a story of faith, abandonment, and the incredible power of human imagination to fill the empty spaces. The hook of the myth is powerful, the ultimate evil stepping into a sacred space. It is a classic battle of good versus evil, played out in stone and wood. But history offers a different kind of story, one that is quieter but just as profound. It speaks of changing communities, the struggles of rural life, and the slow decay of a once important building. By looking at both the legend and the historical records, we can see how one grew out of the other. The devil's visit might be a myth, but the feelings of isolation, fear and neglect that created it were very real for the people who lived in this remote corner of England. This essay will explore both sides of the coin, the chilling tale and the documented past. This exploration begins with a simple question. Why here? What is it about St. Botolph's in Skidbrooke that made it the perfect stage for a diabolical drama? To answer that, we must first find it on a map and understand its unique location. Then we can dive into the legend itself, hearing the story as it has been told for years. After that, we will turn to the dusty pages of history, parish records, old maps and architectural details to build a different picture. By comparing the myth to the verifiable facts, we can begin to see the truth not as a simple answer, but as a rich tapestry woven from both folklore and history, showing us how a community remembers its past. Section 2. Finding Skidbrooke. A place on the map. To understand the legend of the Devil Church, you must first understand where it is. Skidbrooke is a very small village in the county of Lincolnshire, on the east coast of England. This part of the country is known for its flat landscape. The land is very low, crisscrossed by drains and ditches that carry water away to the sea. For centuries, this area was known as the Lincolnshire Marsh. It is a quiet and remote place. The nearest larger towns are Louth to the west and Mablethorpe to the east, but Skidbrooke itself feels a world away from them. The roads are narrow, winding between wide open fields under an enormous sky, making you feel quite small and isolated. The church, St. Botolph's, does not sit in the middle of the village. Instead, it stands alone in a field about a mile from the main cluster of houses. This isolation is a key part of its character and its legend. In the past, this was common for churches in the marshland, as settlements could shift over time due to flooding or changes in farming. But today, seeing a large stone church standing by itself, surrounded by nothing but farmland and the occasional sheep, is a strange and powerful sight. It looks forgotten by time, a silent stone ship adrift in a sea of green grass. This feeling of abandonment is the perfect soil for spooky stories to grow. The geography of the area has shaped its history and its people. Life in the Lincolnshire marsh was historically difficult. The land was damp and prone to flooding, and ague, a type of fever similar to malaria, was common. People were often cut off from their neighbours, especially during the wet winter months. This created close-knit but inward-looking communities. News and stories travelled slowly, often changing as they were passed from person to person. The vast flat landscape and dramatic weather, from thick fogs rolling in from the sea to powerful coastal storms, would have filled daily life with a sense of mystery and awe, making nature itself seem magical or even menacing. When you travel to Skidbrooke today, you can still feel this sense of isolation. Modern life has of course arrived with cars and electricity, but the essential character of the place remains. The sky is huge and ever-present, and the silence can be profound, broken only by the wind or the cry of a seabird. Standing before the lonely church of St. Botolph's, it is not hard to imagine a time when the world felt much bigger and more mysterious. It is in this exact setting, a remote village, a lonely church, and a landscape filled with natural drama, that the story of the Devil's Visit found its perfect home, a place where the supernatural felt just a whisper away. Section 3. The Legend of the Devil's Church. The story that gave St. Botolph's its dark name is simple and terrifying. Local legend says that many years ago the villagers of Skidbrooke decided to summon the devil. The reasons why they did this are often lost in the telling of the tale. Some versions say it was a group of local people dabbling in black magic, seeking power, seeking wealth. Others suggest it was a foolish dare among young men testing their courage against the ultimate evil. Whatever the reason, they gathered inside the church one night, drew a circle, and began their incantation. They called out to the devil, inviting him into the sacred house of God. According to the legend, the summoning worked. The devil appeared among them not as a comical figure with horns and a pitchfork, but as a truly terrifying presence. A great storm was said to have raged outside the church as he arrived, with thunder shaking the old stone walls and lightning illuminating the frightened faces of those inside. The devil was furious that mortals had dared to call him into a holy place. In his rage, he flew around the nave of the church, his anger growing with every second. The people who had summoned him were frozen in terror, unable to move or speak as the dark entity filled the small space with its malevolent energy. The climax of the story is the devil's dramatic exit. Unable to contain his fury any longer, he is said to have leapt onto the church's font, the stone basin used for baptisms, a powerful symbol of Christian faith. From there, he smashed his way out through the roof, leaving a gaping hole in the church and a permanent mark of his visit. The legend claims he left a hoof print, a claw mark burned into the stone of the font or the pillar beside it. This physical mark was said to be proof of the story, a scar on the church that could never be removed. After the devil vanished, the terrified villagers were left in the damaged, desecrated church, forever changed by what they had done. This story has been passed down through generations. It served as a cautionary tale, a warning against meddling with forces beyond human understanding, and a reminder of the sanctity of the church. The details might change slightly from one storyteller to another, the number of people, the exact mark left behind, but the core elements remain the same, a foolish summons. Section 4. Unlocking the past, what the records say. While the legend of the devil is thrilling, the documented history of St. Botolph's Church tells a different, more factual story. Historical records show the church is very old. Construction began in the 13th century, a time of great church building across England. The main structure we see today, nave tower, dates mostly from the 15th century. Parish registers exist from the 16th century onwards. Baptisms, marriages, burials. These documents paint a picture of a normal, functioning parish church at the heart of its community for hundreds of years. There is no mention in any official record of a diabolical visit or any unusual event, like the one described in the legend. Old maps of Lincolnshire help us understand the church's past. A map made by Christopher Saxton in 1576 clearly shows Skidbrooke with its church. This confirms its existence and importance long before the legend likely took its modern form. By looking at these maps over time, we can see how the landscape changed. The area was once more populated. Shifts in agriculture, coastal erosion caused the community to shrink and move slightly inland. This gradual decline and the shifting of the village away from the church are crucial historical facts. The church became isolated not because of a single dramatic event, but because of slow, steady changes over many centuries. The church was officially declared redundant in 1973. This means it was no longer needed for regular worship by the Church of England. When a church is declared redundant, it can fall into disrepair if no one takes care of it. For St. Botolph's, this period of abandonment was when its reputation as the devil church really grew. Building began to decay, windows were broken, it became a target for vandalism. This physical neglect made the church look spooky and forgotten, which perfectly matched the frightening legend. Today, the church is cared for by the Church's Conservation Trust, a charity that protects historic churches at risk. Their work has saved the building from ruin. The building of St. Botolph's itself holds clues to its history, separate from the legend. Its architecture is typical of a style known as Perpendicular Gothic, which was popular in England in the 14th and 15th centuries. You can see this in the large windows designed to let in as much light as possible. The church has a nave, a chancel at the east end where the altar is, and a tall, unbuttressed tower at the west end. The tower is a landmark for miles around in the flat landscape. The simple, sturdy construction shows skilled craftsmen serving a rural community. Inside, the church feels spacious and full of light. The tall, slender pillars are a key feature. One pillar near the font is where the Devil's Mark is supposedly located. The marks are likely natural weathering or candle smoke and soot from centuries past or deliberate mason carving. These are known as mason's marks, but to someone seeking proof they can read them as a claw mark or a burn. The power of suggestion is strong inside these ancient walls. The font is an octagonal stone basin, likely 15th century. It is plain, without elaborate carving. Legend says the devil used it as a stepping stone to escape. In Christian tradition, the font is where infants are baptized, cleansed of original sin. The idea of the devil touching it is shocking. It was the ultimate desecration. Historically, the font was the centerpiece for a key sacrament, symbolizing new life for Skidbrooke. Before rescue, the church suffered neglect. Holes in the roof from theft of lead, not demons. Graffiti on the walls comes from recent visitors drawn by the tales. To truly understand why the legend of the Devil Church was born, we must look at the lives of the people in the Lincolnshire marshes. For centuries, this was a remote, challenging place to live. The economy was based on agriculture, especially sheep farming on the grassy marshland. Life was governed by the seasons and the weather. Communities were small and isolated. People relied heavily on one another. The local church was more than a place of worship, it was the center of the community. Gatherings, news, social events. Belief in the supernatural was normal in rural England until surprisingly recently. The world was full of unexplained things, strange illnesses, sudden storms that could ruin crops. People explained these events with stories of ghosts, fairies, witches, the devil. Those stories weren't just entertainment. They helped make sense of a dangerous, unpredictable world. A tale of the devil visiting a church could be a powerful moral lesson. It warned people to stay true to their faith and to avoid dabbling in things they didn't understand. It reinforced the boundary between good and evil. The spread of such myths is easy to see in a pre-modern society. Stories were told orally, passed from parents to children, or shared in the local inn over a pint of ale. Each telling might add a small new detail, making the story more dramatic or more specific to the place. Skidbrooke's isolation let the local story grow for years unchallenged. The lonely, decaying church provided the perfect backdrop. As memories of the church's active life faded, the exciting legend remained. Even the church's saint's name, St. Botolph, is significant. Saint Botolph was a 7th century Anglo-Saxon abbot, a patron saint of travelers and a protector against evil spirits and demons. It's deeply ironic that a church dedicated to a protector would be called the Devil Church. When we place the legend of the Devil Church side by side with the historical facts, the differences are stark, but they also reveal how the myth was constructed. The legend speaks of a single violent night of terror. History, on the other hand, shows a slow, quiet process of decline over more than a century. The church did not become isolated overnight because of a demonic event. It became isolated because the village population shrank and moved. The people of Skidbrooke did not abandon their church in fear. The church was eventually closed because there were too few people left to maintain it. The physical proof of the devil's visit also crumbles under scrutiny. The supposed claw mark on the pillar is, most likely, a natural imperfection in the stone, or a mason's mark. The hole in the roof, a key part of the legend's dramatic climax, was not caused by an escaping demon. It was the result of lead theft and years of neglect after the church was made redundant in the 1970s. People who visited the church in its derelict state saw a hole in the roof and a spooky mark on a pillar, and they connected these real features to the existing legend. The physical evidence did not create the story. The story used the evidence to make itself seem true. The motivation in the legend, villagers summoning the devil, also contrasts with the historical reality. Parish records show centuries of ordinary Christian worship, but the people of Skidbrooke were not, as a community, Satanists. They were farmers and laborers living lives of faith. However, the idea of summoning the devil taps into a long history of fears about witchcraft and black magic. Such stories were common across Europe. The Skidbrooke legend is a local version of a very old and widespread type of tale. It attaches a general fear to a specific, identifiable place. While historical records provide one view, the memories of local people offer another. In researching local folklore, it is often the small, personal accounts that bring a story to life. An article in a local newspaper from the 1980s quoted a former resident who had grown up near Skidbrooke. He said, "We were always told as children, don't you go near the old church after dark. They said the devil had claimed it for his own." This simple quote shows how the legend was used by parents to keep children away from a potentially dangerous, derelict building. The story was not just a spooky tale. It had a practical purpose in the community, functioning as a warning. These personal stories rarely mention specific dates or historical details. Instead, they focus on feelings and atmosphere. People who remember the church before its restoration often speak of the eerie silence, the wind whistling through the broken windows, and the long shadows cast by the setting sun. One account from an amateur ghost hunter's website describes the feeling of being watched inside the empty nave. Whether this feeling was caused by a supernatural presence or simply by the power of suggestion in a creepy place, the experience was real for that person. These subjective experiences are a huge part of what keeps the legend alive in the modern era. It is important to note that many local people have a more balanced view. They know the legend, but they also remember the church as a part of their heritage. They might have had grandparents who were baptized there, or have ancestors buried in the churchyard. For them, St. Botolph's is not just the Devil Church. It is a historic landmark that belongs to the community. They see the legend as one part of a much longer and richer history. This more nuanced perspective is often lost in sensationalized television shows or online articles that focus only on the paranormal aspect of the story. The contrast between the scary legend and the quiet reality is the essence of my night spent at the church. There were no demonic appearances, no ghostly whispers on the wind. There was only the sound of the breeze moving through the grass outside, and the immense, profound silence of a building that has stood for nearly 800 years. The experience was not frightening. It was deeply peaceful. It felt like stepping back in time, not to a moment of supernatural terror, but to a time of quiet faith. The loudest voice in the church was not the devil's, but the silent voice of history itself, written in the stone. The story of St. Botolph's Church in Skidbrooke is a perfect example of how myth and history become entangled. The legend of the Devil's Visit is a powerful, dramatic narrative that has captured the imagination of generations. It is a story of evil terror, a permanent scar left on a holy place. This tale gave the lonely church a new identity, transforming it from a forgotten parish building into a famous landmark of folklore. The legend ensured that St. Botolph's would not be completely forgotten, even as its congregation disappeared and its walls began to crumble. In a strange way, the devil saved the church's memory and wood all around me. However, the historical record tells a quieter, more human story. It speaks of a community's faith, centuries of baptisms, marriages, burials. It reveals a slow decline caused by economic changes, social changes, not by a supernatural event. The history of St. Botolph's is the history of the Lincolnshire marshes themselves, a story of resilience, adaptation, eventual change. By understanding this history, we do not destroy the legend, we place it in its proper context. We can appreciate the story for what it is, a piece of folk art created by a community to explain the loss of a building that was once at the very center of its world. My night in the Devil Church confirmed this conclusion. The building did not feel evil. It felt ancient, peaceful, profoundly historic. The fears and legends seemed to belong to the world outside its walls, to the stories people tell about it rather than to the stones themselves. The experience highlighted the difference between a place and its reputation. The legend is a shadow that has been cast over the church, a shadow that is darker and more exciting than the object itself. But when you step into the church, you step out of the shadow and into the light of its long and peaceful history. Ultimately, the Skidbrooke legend teaches us a valuable lesson about how we remember the past. History is not just a collection of dates and facts, it is also about the stories we tell to make sense of those facts. The legend of the Devil Church is a testament to the power of human imagination to create meaning, especially in the face of decay and loss. St. Botolph's Church survives today, saved by those who value its real history. And yet, the shadow of the devil's legend will likely always linger, reminding us that sometimes the most enduring stories are the ones that are not quite true. This documented history provides a powerful and important contrast to the popular supernatural tale. The records show a story not of devils, but of devotion, baptized at the font, married before the altar, buried in the churchyard. What endures is the place, the people who held it dear, and the stories, both mythical and true, that keep its memory alive.